So I guess it's high time I did a review on the Zeb. Now I've had this Zeb for a couple of months now. Started with the standard setup. Everything went back and forth, hunting for that smooth control in sag. So for it to be smooth and controlled, I had to run it at like 12% sag, no tokens. And it was just way too tall, and it was choppy when you get into the real rough stuff. So you drop the pressure a bit, get it to 15% sag, and it's divey. So you add tokens, try and get it down to, I like to run my forks at 20%. Try and get it down to 20%, 2 tokens, 20% sag is kind of like the best of what I like to look for. 3 tokens, you got to drop a little more in the sag, but it starts to come a little more controllable again. 4 tokens, fairly good control, but deep in the sag and nothing off the top, so you got to really fill it in with compression, so that top bit isn't squishy and yucky, and then it makes the ride feel a bit dead. Very precise, but dead and not great through the rough, and definitely not great trying to hold holding speed, but just didn't feel great. So I like my forks, like I said, 20% sag. Gives me a good position and allows the balance of the bike to work well. Back and forth. Change the oil in the lowers to make it more slippery. I run a Castrol 10W30. Really slick compared to the 0W30 that Rockshox runs, which isn't a great oil. Don't think it's a great oil. Compared to other oils I've used in the lowers, it's definitely not a great oil. Friction, putting the lowers on and off, there's an obvious binding issue between the upper, so when you service it or service the spring or whatever, you take the lowers off. When you put the lowers back on, there are no worries through the first 2 bushings, the top bushings, which are about here. Push it on fairly free, and then you hit the second bushing, and it's just it separates the fork. Separates the lower more because the lower isn't in alignment with the upper, so it separates the lower and creates a lot of friction there. So after a year of riding, you're going to have wear on your lowers, wear on your uppers, down in the lower portion of your uppers, where it's starting to wear off the coating, the fast black coating. So I got the lowers replaced because of that. And it's exactly the same, and it's exactly the same on every single Zeb that I've ever serviced. So that's a manufacturing issue. They've definitely rushed this fork to market to probably just to keep with the 38 and make sure they don't lose all their customers to Fox, which I'll address soon as well, the comparison between this and the 38. The lower, where your bolts bolt up, every single Zeb I've had, where you bolt up the screw for the rebound, they all leak here. They all leak under here. See, look at that. Every single one of them leaks. So not badly, but just weeps constantly. So that's not ideal. Don't like that either. So just definitely rushed. Definitely a rushed product. Next, the air spring. They've gone, compared to the size of the positive chamber, the negative chamber is not very big. So and they also have it at have the equalization at full extension. So there's always it takes away the suppleness of the fork, and that again leads into using more tokens to find your balance, because you got a certain size negative and a certain size positive. You got to bring those ratios closer. So you load up the positive with tokens to bring those ratios closer to get the fork to perform how you want it. The problem with a smaller negative chamber is, in that situation, you got to go enough tokens to even out the ratio, and that leaves you at 25%. So this fork will be best in balance at closer to 25% than 20%. And I don't really like that lower front of that 25% setup and the squishiness at the top. Sure, it makes everything super supple off the top, but it makes it the hits at the top are soft and the hits at the bottom are hard. It's no consistency throughout the travel with how the hits feel. So you've got to brace yourself for the deep hits and don't have to worry about the shallow hits. Whereas with a more balanced, a larger negative and a better balance of spring there, you can kind of have your cake and eat it too. You can have it tall, 20% sag, efficient everywhere, but the bumps feel the same. The bumps at the top of the travel feel the same as the bumps at the end of the travel. It's just consistent all the way through. People talk about coil-like, and it's just really consistent. So just a lot of negatives of this fork. It's such a shame because every fork that Rockshox has brought out has been killer. Everything they've done, their rear shocks, their forks, have always been killer. The only letdowns with their rear shocks is the through shaft on the Treks. They shouldn't have gone that through shaft route, but is what it is. It just creates more friction after it's been working a little while. Straight off the gate, yeah, it's nice and free and whatever, but as soon as you get a bit of dirt in there and a bit of use on it, the stiction from that through shaft is incredible. It just gets real sticky and it's just not a great shock. So not into that, and it's harder to service than a standard shock. Needs more proprietary bits and pieces. What else don't I like? Oh, creaky steerers. Some of my friends are on their fourth, fifth, sixth creaky steerer on these forks. It's just garbage. It's just everything about this fork has been brought out rushed. Now, let's flip it over to the positives. One positive is this air spring can be easily altered with a Vorsprung Luft cap. Now, the Luft cap is the only saving grace for this fork. It turns it from a garbage, to me, just a garbage product in comparison to what Rockshox top-end stuff is. Not saying it's garbage across the board, but it's compared to what Rockshox is known for and their standard of work, it's just not there at all. It's not there at all. Enter the Luft cap, it becomes exactly like the B1 Lyric. So the Lyric with the B1 Debonair spring, which is the first iteration of the Debonair spring. They've gone the C1 now. Every fork comes out with the C1 Debonair spring, which to me isn't as good. And it's the same story. Smaller negative air chamber, so you run more tokens. In the Lyric, you can get it feeling pretty good with 4 tokens. The C1 spring, or the B1 spring is between no token and 1 token, depending on where you want your sag. So adding the Luft cap to this doesn't get rid of any of the rubbing, the friction. Changing your oil helps with the friction in the lowers for sure. So getting rid of the 0W30. I don't recommend it because that Rockshox recommend only using their oils. But in my experience, this Castrol 10W30 and even my old ULX 110 10W30 oil is just way slipperier. And keeps the fork feeling good forever or for a while. So yeah, I don't recommend it, but that's what I use, and it's killer. So saving graces are the change of the oil and ultimately the Luft cap for this fork. On the bright side, Rockshox are killer with warranty. They're always there for you. So as soon as that thing starts creaking, the steerer starts creaking, isolate it. Make sure it's not your bearings in your headset. So service your headset. Make sure and you can isolate that it's actually coming from the steerer, and when it is, send it back, get a freshie. And it looks like the freshies that they're replacing with are worse than the standard ones. They number one, they don't have the sag indicators on, they don't have any writing on them, and number two, they seem to be, so the initial is like 6 months to 12 months of riding, then they're creaking like hell, and then the follow-ups, the replacements are like 2 months, 3 months, and then they're creaking. So I don't know what they're doing, I don't know what the go is, I don't know why they rushed it, but I am not into this Zeb at all. It's heavy, and if the performance was incredible, I wouldn't care about the weight at all. But the performance isn't incredible unless you spend the money and put the Luft cap in. Rockshox are bringing out a new spring, and hopefully they're bringing out a lower that matches the upper. So they do have a new lower in the market, or in the process of coming to market, with the burp buttons on the back, the fart buttons or whatever you want to relieve the pressure in the lowers. Not super necessary, but definitely helps in hard riding and when you do get that pressure build up and whatnot. So yeah, that's a cool addition. But hopefully when they bring that lower out, it's a lower that matches the upper, so there's no longer any friction and misalignment between the bushings and or between the lowers and the uppers with the bushing rubbing. So, and it's not a bushing alignment issue because it's every single Zeb that I've tried. It always opens the lower up. So it's either the uppers aren't completely parallel or the lowers aren't completely parallel. One or the other, but it's still, they shit the bed to me. They've shit the bed. So Rockshox, I don't hate you. I still, everything that you make. My Lyric is the best fork on the market. B1 spring, absolutely the best fork on the market. The 38 is very, very close next to it. 38's got an excellent spring system once you've serviced it. Comes terrible from the factory, 8 times out of 10. That tube in a tube, the bottom of that tube is full of grease, destroying your negative air chamber, so making you run a compromised setup. So once that's serviced, the 38 is incredible. Once that spring is serviced, the 38 is excellent. The damping's quite good on that. I don't know about creaky steerers. I haven't heard of anyone replacing their steerer for a creak yet. Not just flicking through my Teledex of memory. So 38 is great, but super heavy as well. To me, unless you're a heavy guy on a heavy bike charging super hard, stick to the Lyric is the king. The Lyric is still the king. But on that note, you can't buy a B1 spring anymore. You can't get them anywhere. Rockshox have discontinued them. I don't know why they don't want to. Maybe they're going to come up with something better again for the Lyric to throw this C1 out the window. Because sure, the C1's okay, but you can make it work well, but it's not. They've lost their grandeur. They've lost their king of the castle status with that C1 spring. I think, in my opinion, a lot of people like it. A lot of people say it's killer, but yeah, that's my thoughts on the Zeb. Sorry if you love them and whatever, and you're pretty dirty on my opinion. I'm just trying to be objective. That's what I've found with them. Yeah, I'm not into it. And it's really hard to line up. So if you buy the fender with it, it's really hard to line up the bolts to get. You can get 2 of 3 bolts in, but if you really work it, you can get them. You can make it happen, but misalignment with the bolts as well. So I don't know. They're out the arse. It's a shame, but I'm sure they've got something in the works to fix this, and maybe in a couple of years' time they'll apologise for it. But they definitely rushed it to market, and for me, it's the Lyric all day. My Lyric is, when I put the Lyric back on, it's as good as this now with this upgraded with the luft cap. This just feels stronger because I've got the adjustment of high-speed compression. On my Lyric, I don't have high-speed compression adjustment. So if I had high-speed compression adjustment on my Lyric, I would definitely not leave these on the bike. I'd sell them in their current configuration with the luft cap, so people are getting the value for money, the fork, or that they deserve. So yeah, I guess I'm just rambling now. But yeah, Zeb over the Lyric over the Zeb for sure. If you've got a Zeb, luft cap it, and if you don't want to luft cap it, go back to a Lyric for sure. Or 3 tokens, 2 to 3 tokens.